I mean, honestly, it's funny because it just comes down to a willingness of sticking to it till you figure it out. I mean, that's the biggest piece. And I think one of the things that was really interesting for me is, like you said, coming from film and then working at some startups and then coming into like an old school, traditional private practice, the speed and rate of change was shocking to me.
Yeah.
Because like film, you're working in a film business. People don't really know this about film, but like every film is pretty much a startup business where you starting from the ground, you build an entire business up and then you deconstruct it. It's
Interesting.
because there's so many moving parts. There's so many moving pieces. And it's constant adjustment. So I think that was something I was already naturally always liked, that fast pace. But I'm coming from that world where it's like every day is
okay.
like,
So film was more fast paced for you.
Oh,
okay.
it's crazy fast paced. Yeah,
So compared to PT, where you're like, come on, do something. Okay.
It's crazy. And so it was shocking, a little shocking coming in from that perspective as well, of just being both in startups and in film, where every day is reaction, every day is a change, every day is like you have to make very quick decisions because every dollar depends on it, and you've got an allotted amount of time to get something done. So I think that helped me on coming in with that mindset of like we can move a whole lot faster than what we're doing. I think that's something I see a lot in healthcare is there's definitely a lot of resistance to change, more so than in a lot of other industries. So coming in with that mindset, I think was really helpful for me, of being like, just constantly asking why. I think that was also how I was just relentless about that in the first handful of years, and still, and trying to instill that on the team, is asking constantly, like, why are we doing it this way? Is this the best way to do it? And
Sure.
if the answer is, well, this is how we've always done it, then you're like, great.
Wasn't good enough.
that
All right, guys, and welcome to the Levels podcast here with Rehab CEOs. I'm Dr. Robbie Woelkers, and today I'm being joined by Ben Carlson. He's the owner over at Carlson Pro Care, all the way up in Connecticut. Ben, welcome today, man. How are you doing today?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me.
Hey, man. 5 locations, all the way up in Connecticut, soon to be a couple more. You're a busy guy these days. So before we dive in today, tell us a little bit about what you're doing over there in Connecticut and what's your current plans and what do we have planned in the future here?
Thanks for having me. Always good to chat with you, Robbie.
Yeah, man, absolutely.
2024 has all been about, refresh, rebrand, and kind of reestablishing our voice in the marketplace. So as we were looking at where we were, we're a 40-year-old business, and it really became clear over the last year or so that it was time that we needed to really modernize and refresh. So that was our big initiative for 2024, was figuring out our strategies for renovating clinics, modernizing them, bringing in new technology, and then also assessing whether the clinics that we've got are in the right spots. Some of the clinics we've been in, we had those locations for 15 years or 20 years. And at that point in time, the strategy for selecting that clinic is very different than it is in today's marketplace. Obviously, like back then at that point, it was always critical to be tied with, an orthopod or, that referral source. And so that's where the strategy came into play for some of those clinics. Whereas now, we're looking to be more earlier on in that conversation and having that direct exposure. So that was a big place that we are assessing with our existing clinics. Some of them are tucked away in these, old medical executive pavilion type buildings that, you got no street exposure, and, people know us because they know us. They've cut we've got the community exposure for the time that we've done, but wanting to find places where we can be more out in front and, forward facing and getting that as direct referral sources.
That's awesome, man. And well, to be very clear, you don't look like you're over 40. So to be 40 years in business, was this your dad that had it initially, or family business, or?
Yeah, so family business. So dad started it, depending on how you look at it.
Who you ask.
Yeah, depending on who you ask, what records you look at, we're in that range about 40 years. So yeah, he was extremely innovative in his own right, and the business has gone through, drastic changes over that period of
Yeah,
time.
almost 4 decades worth of PT. He was there during the gold standard, the $300 visits that were just printing money.
So yeah, we do joke about that.
Yeah.
He says to me sometimes, he's like, I would never be able to run the business now. He's like,
Yeah, they
based
were
off
just
of, you know,
printing money back
based
a
off,
couple of
yeah,
decades ago, and now it's a
yeah,
little bit
yeah.
tighter. So,
But he was, I mean, to his credit, he was very innovative. And, you know, when he went into private practice, it wasn't even something it wasn't even like a thing yet. You know, he was one of the early people to really go outside. He was working at the hospital, and just seeing that the people that were making the decisions and kind of telling him how to do care just had no idea, you know, what they were talking about. They weren't trained in
yeah.
physical therapy. And, you know, just like all entrepreneurs start, he was like, well, I'm pissed off. You know, don't tell me how to run my business and how to treat my patients. And so he went out on his own and started it. He actually got the hospital to agree to allow him to be a private practice in the hospital to start. So he started like in the basement of a hospital.
That'll cost you a couple $1 million these days.
Yeah, yeah. Not something any of us are going to do today.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's how it started 40 years ago. Went through some very, you know, first 10 to 15 years, had some slow growth and grew in the community. And I think by year 15 was when he started growing and having a few more offices in the clinic or in the Connecticut. And then he had a big explosion. We had a big explosion between early 2000s and 2010, where we expanded. We actually our network consisted of like 23 to 25 clinics.
Oh,
Uh,
wow. Okay. So
so
that was your
scaled.
peak. You were at like 20. So that was the peak of like how many?
That
Okay.
was the peak. That was the peak. And then she had some health stuff. We had some challenges with some of the legislation, because a lot of those we grew fast were, you know, next to orthos. And then we had legislation come out where orthos could staff their own PTs. And once that came out, that was like one year, I think, where we wiped out like, you know, 10 clinics just pretty much immediately, because they were all just their entire
Oh,
referral
wow.
source
So
was
imagine that. Like some people on here is like, imagine like
yeah.
10 of your businesses just disappearing overnight because of the private owned practices or the physician owned practices that popped up, the POPs clinics, as people would say. So they started taking up market share. And then you guys went up to about 23, 25 different locations, dropped by 10. And then fast forward a couple of years, your dad started to have some health stuff, and he was looking. Now, was he looking to sell, or was he always going to like, was the goal always to pass it down to you?
No,
Or
no.
yeah.
So that was neither of our plans. So and it's
Okay.
funny because there wasn't even never even a conversation him and I had, because I was out doing other things in other fields. And it so happened, fast forward to 2018, we were at that time, we just sold off 2 clinics, so we were at 7, and he was having some health stuff. I was kind of coming back and forth. I was living in Brooklyn, New York, and I was traveling back and forth like every few days to help him out. I was at a startup that just, you know, I just didn't seem
Sure.
like it was going anywhere. I was also doing the artist thing at that point in time, living in Brooklyn with like 18
Yeah,
dudes
film,
in a
art. I saw
closet,
that,
you know.
man. Congrats.
And I was getting to the point where I was like, that's just, you know, I was ready for a change. You know,
Okay.
four dudes sharing one bathroom in Brooklyn is just, you know,
Yeah,
you can
for
only
$1,000 each.
do it for so long.
For sure.
Uh,
Yeah, yeah.
so, you know, it's kind of like all things came together at once. And I was like, you know what, let me go home, let me reset. I'd only planned on coming home for a few months, but let me reset, let me take care of him, get him situated. And because of what he was going through, him and a lot of the meetings were being hosted at the house where I was also. And, you know,
Okay.
little by little, I was kind of like sitting in.
Start to get
Yeah.
some osmosis there. So it
Yeah,
starts
so
to
I was sitting in on some of those meetings, and then after, you know, 4 or 5 of them, I started saying like, "Hey, have you guys thought about this?" It was particularly in that point in time, it was about some marketing things, and one thing led to the next, where, you know, he was, you know, I kind of ended up being his eyes on the ground, because he couldn't be, and so he was like, "Hey, go check this thing out. I want you to go tell me what you think about this. Tell me what you think about this." And so, you know, my first year was just me kind of being an investigator, drinking out of a fire hose, trying to understand the business and
Yeah,
report
awesome,
back
man.
to him. And one thing led to the next. I made some decisions. We made some decisions as a leadership team based off of some of those insights. And here we are now, 5.5, 6 years later.
Awesome, man. Yeah, and it's interesting. interesting because like people who come into our kind of atmosphere is, they either are starting their own clinic and they're in that producer role. That's kind of like level one. And then eventually they hire their first admin or provider. So they get into like level number two, where they have to learn how to be a unifier manager. Level three is that communicator role. You bypassed all of that. So you bypassed all of that because you're not a PT. So you didn't have to worry about treating patients. And you did have the ability to manage people. So you had to learn that skill set, but you already had some communication skill set because you were in art and you were in, I don't know if you did theater as well, but most art and theater do. And then the filmmaking was the other one I saw. So you're in a massive attractive character communicator role. So that was great. And now you're into level 4 of becoming the rehab CEO, where you're opening locations and you're condensing and you're growing, you're expanding, mergers, acquisition. So how does someone 5 years ago that was just sitting at your dad's table overhearing some meetings become the person now where you're actually running this multi-million-dollar business and becoming that operator? And, what has that transformation been like for you?
Yeah, it's a lot of stubbornness,
It must be Taurus. Are you a Taurus, brother? Because I'm a German Taurus, so you can't get me to move too much. So
yeah, Aries.
There you go. Pretty close. There you go.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's funny because it just comes down to a willingness of sticking to it till you figure it out. I mean, that's the biggest piece. And I think one of the things that was really interesting for me is, like you said, coming from film and then working at some startups and then coming into like an old school traditional private practice, the speed and rate of change was shocking to me. Because like film, you're working in a film business. People don't really know this about film, but like every film is pretty much a startup business where you, starting from the ground, you build an entire business up and then you deconstruct it. It's
interesting
because there's so many moving parts, there's so many moving pieces, and it's constant adjustment. So I think that was something I was already naturally always liked, that fast pace, but I'm coming from that world where it's like every day is
okay.
like,
So film was more fast paced for you.
Oh,
okay,
it's crazy fast paced. Yeah.
So I mean, compared to PT, where you're like, come on, do something. Okay.
It's crazy. And so it was shocking, a little shocking coming in from that perspective as well, of just being both in startups and in film, where every day is a reaction, every day is a change, every day is like you have to make very quick decisions because every dollar depends on it, and you've got an allotted amount of time to get something done. So I think that helped me on coming in with that mindset of like, we can move a whole lot faster than what we're doing. I think that's something I see a lot in healthcare, is there's definitely a lot of resistance to change, more so than in a lot of other industries. So coming in with that mindset, I think, was really helpful for me, of being like, just constantly asking why. I think that was also how I was just relentless about that in the first handful of years, and trying to instill that on the team, is asking constantly, like, why are we doing it this way? Is this the best way to do it? And if the answer is, well, this is how we've always done it, then you're like, great,
wasn't good enough.
That's it's time.
And you could at least blame your dad then, because you'd be like, well, that's why he put me in charge. Let's figure this out. Do you feel that? And I want to talk about that for a second, because I think this will benefit a lot of people listening to this, is because we hear it all the time, is that people don't want to implement things or change things because they're nervous that their team might blow back or push back. Do you think the change management is so slow in PT because of like more fear of failure? Or do you think it's more like fear of success? Or do you think it is like worrying about the team blowing back and possibly quitting? Like, what do you think that is, just in your opinion?
Yeah, I would say certainly the first and the last, as far as fear of failure. I don't think fear of success, I don't think is in there.
That to me, my definition, just so we're on the same page, is like people like are afraid to grow because it means that it's going to be more of their time. So like if you have an owner who's producing and stuck in treatment, like they don't want to grow because that just means more of their time.
Yeah.
Or if they change something, they don't have time to manage it. It's kind of thing. So it's just, that's more what that is.
Yeah. I mean, it's certainly a combination of the three. I think that healthcare, and PT in particular, you have to think about the history of it and how it's developed as a field, particularly when you think about like sales and marketing. If you think about that like in another field, right? It's such a different beast, right? Because if you don't have good sales, you don't have good marketing, your business doesn't exist. And so you have to be constantly innovating on those fronts. Whereas PTs have always been somewhat secondary in that process, where their sales and marketing is based off of the referral sources in the area and just those relationships. So I think like that dynamic is a piece of the puzzle that has really stifled innovation in the PT space.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Because you just don't have to think about it the same. You don't have to think about it the same. And it's easier to have those drips be kind of turned on once that relationship is solid. You've got a referral source that's, 10 plus years that's going to send you 3 to 4 patients a week. So you don't necessarily have to be thinking outside the box. And that's the type of thinking that is going to then push you into a place where you're regularly thinking about change or thinking about these types of dynamics more holistically as a business.
Awesome, man. No, that makes sense, because I see that a lot where people, they when it comes to change, they tighten up a little bit, but you hit the nail on the head with that, because, there's a law of entropy, everything left to itself moves towards chaos and disorder. We are one of the few businesses that our customers on their way out literally lean in and say, I hope I never see you guys again. Right. So let's say, but if I need you, I know where to find you, but hopefully I never see you again. So there's just a lot of disorder, right? People leaving.
Well, and then you also have the fact that you have the nature of the business in healthcare of having insurance contracts. If you are a network, you're also somewhat limited with your contracts on like the type of creative things that you can do. And so those two things combined, I think, just make it a very risk adverse profile. And so I think that's a big piece of it. To go back to your question on, are people scared of change or are they afraid of people leaving? I think the shortage in PT has definitely got people afraid of that. So, that's a big piece of it. But I think that then comes down to just not being clear on your messaging and not being clear on your why and where you're trying to go. So I think that's another big piece of it as well. And then I think, I've had the advantage to a certain extent, to your point, of not being in the weeds treating. And I think that can be a really hard dynamic. And it's been a blessing. Also, one of my biggest frustrations as a business owner, being in that realm of thinking, if I see that we're like right now, I've got offices that are understaffed and we're looking for a new therapist for, because volume is what it is. And I can't do anything about it. I have to sit here and watch. I can't jump in and get on the table.
Let me hop in and treat.
Let me hop in and treat. And there's plenty of times where I set up late nights. It's like, how long would it take me to actually get my PTA license? Like, would I just do that on the evenings? Just so
don't ever do that.
Yeah.
You'll violate our rule number 1, which is thou shalt not treat.
Yeah. So to that point though, is like, I've had that as an advantage because I have to constantly be just thinking in the strategy, and I can't just deflect and get back into the weeds and get onto the table and get into that space. I think it's easy to get really trapped in that space as somebody that's running a business, as a business owner who also has been the driver, and their worth has been assigned, internal worth has been assigned to the results that they're getting in the clinic. I think that's a very challenging transition for people to get through, to kind of get from that one, from A to B in that transition, I think can be tough. So I've had that not be something that I've had to go through. I just have to constantly go back to strategy.
Yeah, there's some cliches in business where it's just like, imagine you went away on vacation and you came back. Does your business sustain itself, or can your business grow without you there? You're working on the business, is not in the business. Well, something we always tell owners is, imagine you lost your PT license, you could never treat again. That's the frame I want you to be in once you start opening multiple locations, because there's always this temptation that PTO coverage, or if you didn't hire somebody, you go back in to treat, but then you get stuck. So for those that are listening now, Ben, he's not a PT. He actually went to University of Connecticut. He got his psychology degree, and then he took over the family business, but they can't rely on Ben to treat. So he has to come from another frame of like, okay, well, how can I make this work since I can't make it work? So it's like, I can't go in and help out, which is great. So that's why he's able to bypass that producer role, because he can't produce. He can't be that producer. And then for you, Ben, when we first linked up, you had all these locations, you went from, your dad went from all these locations down to about 7, and then you guys ended up with 5 here through COVID, and now you have 5 at the moment. And, obviously we're going to try to expand again. However, you're leveraging a really nice principle that I like to call the law of advancement. It's like sometimes you got to go down before you go up, and you're condensing 2 locations, which is, by the way, most owners that have multiple locations, my opinion is that a lot of times people open multiple locations for more status purposes than anything. It's just like, I like the status of having multiple locations. But for you to sit there, look at your business and be like, nah, we need to go down to 4 and then we can expand. Like, walk me through how you made the decision to not necessarily close, but to merge 2. And then you're going to look into getting 2 more, either through acquisitions or growth, whatever that looks like. But that's a really hard thing to look on paper and be like, we need to close this, merge them together, and then regroup with 4 before we even go to 6 or 7. So walk us through that.
Yeah, so it's funny because it actually wasn't a super hard decision for me once I got into the numbers of it. But so when I came in, this was actually something I did right, we talked about doing right out of the gate when I came in and started looking at some of the different components of the business. Like I said, we came in, it was 7, and we closed 2 offices within the first year of me being involved, because 2 of them were set up as, the strategy originally was, all right, we're going to put this location here because we've got a small space within an ortho group. So we're going to leverage that to get in with these referral sources. And
Awesome.
we'll do that, right? So that was the original thinking and the strategy. The issue was we didn't then staff up the PTs to support that. So what happened was you had PTs traveling to this like remote location to kind of get the referrals. And I just looked at the demographics and I was like, the patients are just following you wherever you are. So why are we carrying the space?
Yeah, why we opened up another location or 2
we're adding more
volume, same volume, but just more
volume's
expensive.
exactly the same. But I literally went through the list of patients. I was like, 75% of your patients have seen you in both locations. So why do we have this?
What are we doing here?
What are we doing here? Yeah. So we closed that one. And another one, it was a single location that was losing money like crazy because we just had 1 PT, and she then left. And this was 2 months into me getting involved. So she was the sole PT there, was just kind of breaking even, and then she left. And so we're like, we got an empty space. I tried for 3 months to try and find somebody, and then it just didn't make sense. So we closed it to focus. With the 2 that you're talking about that we're working on now, there were a handful of things that made it make a lot of sense. So number 1 was the current 2 locations are only 9 to 10 minutes apart from each other, depending on which way you go. So that's piece number 1. Piece number 2, I speculated and kind of talked with the team that there was a lot of crossover, like I was just talking about, with those 2 locations.
Yeah.
So what we did is, we did the same thing. We did demographic search and found that it was like 25 to 30% of the patients were going to had been seen in both locations. And
so that's interesting. So you look at the data. So you look at your patients to see who's doing what plan of care and in what location, and notice that they're just wherever the therapist was on Tuesday, Thursday, they would be.
Or the availability. Yeah. It was, seeing that too, just being like, oh, well, I can only come at this time, and say, oh, well, we've got an opening over there. Why don't you head over to that location?
Oh, gotcha. So you're just, it was the same patients just doing the flow at each. And you're like, why don't we just do it at one place? Okay.
Yeah. So like that, and that was something we talked about for a while. We weren't quite in a place to make it make sense. And then we found a space that was like double the square footage or pretty much equal to combining the square footage of the 2 that we had, that happened to be dab smack in the middle of the 2 locations. So the location we're combining, 2 locations right now, 10 minutes apart. The one we're combining to is dead set in the middle.
Right in the middle. Yeah. Awesome.
4 minutes from one, 5 minutes from the other, and can support the consolidated base and load. Also did like a geographic map search of all patients seen in the last year, and saw that, that moving to that location from the one that is the little bit further, still like 75% of our patients is pretty much the same distance. So kind of checked all those boxes. And the last piece to it was we were the piece that really had us move over the finish line and jump to action on this was assessing the growth potential in the 2 clinics that we had. And as we're really assessing whether we renovated those clinics and tried to blow out some walls or open more space, that we were pretty much maxed out. If we were to add one more PT in either one of the two locations, that we were going to immediately pretty much be at our full capacity.
Okay,
And
that makes
so,
sense.
it didn't make sense to invest in those existing spaces, knowing that we already were pretty much tapped out. And then the last piece we talked about was, to start the call, both of those locations are tucked away in old executive
Yeah, they're just
billions. They've got no street.
they don't
They've
have
got
that
no
modern
street.
feel to
Yeah,
it.
they got no street value.
Yeah, yeah.
So, we've got no exposure to people that maybe don't know us or, are new to PT. And so that was the last piece. So the place that we found is right on Main Street, right off, literally stoplight right in front of it, all of the gyms and Starbucks across the street and, all those things. So that visibility is, 100x what we've got right now.
Awesome. Yeah, and there's a couple nuggets to pull out of that. So Ben mentioned, so he brushed over the heat mapping, where you can actually map your current patients. You could put them on there's different tools that you could use. Google's got some, different platforms have some. But you could actually map your patients out, and you could see okay, well, where's kind of my heat map here because Ben's in Connecticut, and he could see, okay, I have some people up here, I have some people over here. Ooh, that makes sense. I see a pocket opening up here. And then what you can then do is be like, okay, well, if I open a location here, that will then open up my next location. Because when you open up a fifth location, or even your second, when you go from location 1 to 2, your second location then opens the door for where you want to open up 3, and 3 opens 4. And then that's how things just kind of start going quickly. So you can have that option. And also, Ben, just to put it in more of a sequence: owner out of treatment, leadership team in place, max out, oversubscribe, have a reserve, and hiring. Those are our 6 commandments for opening multiple locations here. So Ben's already out of treatment. He ended up putting leadership in place at all his locations, and he's working on that now, which I'll cover in a second, because you did something unique with one of your people at one of your locations for leadership that's working really well. And then he's maxing out what he's currently got. But he said that those other ones, we were already maxed out. So even if we went and did some renovations and stuff, you might only be able to get one extra provider in there. So by the time you do the renovations and get one extra provider in there, are we really making any more money? So when we, close those down and merge and get a bigger space, well, now how many more PTs could you get at your new location that you have? Are you just condensing down and everybody's in the same place, or could you actually get a couple more PTs in there?
Yeah, so we could add, so that location, can support, between 4 and 6, maybe even 7 full-time providers.
Well, it's 6 for comfort.
Yeah, we'll see what the market.
Yeah, 7 is tight, but we could get 6 in there for comfort. Okay.
So yeah, but the nice thing with that is, we're, from a cash flow standpoint, really, when you're at 4 or more, you're fine. So the other piece and I mentioned to you before we started recording, is that location is a bit of a hot spot for recruiting, more so than the rest of our locations. So we're planning to expand out from that spot. So the idea is we can staff a little bit more up in that facility as we're then looking to maybe branch out and add the next location. That can be a bit of the incubator to move people over, because it's got the space to do so.
Yeah, and if you guys don't know this, when you have 4, 5, 7 locations, you're going to have 3 issues: retention, recruitment, and real estate. So it's retention of your patients and your staff. It's going to be recruiting new patients and staff, and then real estate, trying to find spaces. So Ben strategically is just when we're doing these moves, where are the local universities at with these students? Because 40% of all students are taking jobs at their clinicals now. So where can we put a location that's a little bit closer, so then that allows them to come in and do their clinicals next to your office or whatever that looks like. And I know recently you were able to go and do even a job fair or whatever that looks like at the school. So very strategic, which is awesome. And now for you guys, Ben, now that you're getting leadership team in all these as well, walk us through real quick on so who did you promote to a leadership position? Maybe you were a little bit on the fence about it, and then eventually you're like, could you even do that? We were like, I mean, as long as they got followers, man. So who did you promote, and how's it been working out for you?
Yeah, so we actually went through a whole leadership revamp across the whole company in the last 2 years. So this was just a piece of that dynamic. But the person you're talking about in particular was, we had a PTA that, Robbie and I were going back and forth on, and we're concerned with them being a PTA, whether or not they could be a clinical director. And Robbie and I had a little heart to heart on that call. And he's like, does he have checked all the other boxes for a leader that you guys would want? We're like, 1,000%. It's literally, everything else, he checks the box. It's just that he's a PTA, and we're concerned about, evals and things like that. And after that call, gave me the push to go ahead with it. And it's been excellent. It really is. It's really worked well. It's like finding the right people first and building around them. And, sometimes it's not always what you are anticipating or what you look like, but being really clear that you got the right people in place and then you're building around them has been a big piece to our strategy over the last year.
Yeah, that's huge. And we see that a lot. We see that from a leadership position, leaders need to have followers, and followers could either be earned or manipulated. So this PTA in general, a lot of followers. People are going them with advice. They were, asking them for information. They were there to be coachable. They were able to have some of those harder conversations, and they just didn't have the title. But then I told Ben, I said, well, can a PTA own their own clinic? He's like, yeah. It's like, well, then they could be a clinical director. Why not? So, and I'm glad it worked out. But sometimes we, our mind plays tricks on us a little bit. And sometimes we can't see the forest through the trees, but it works out well. So we've had the same thing. We had 2 PTAs that were awesome, and they easily could have been clinical director potential too. So if anybody's got really good PTAs in their clinic, a little hesitant to put them in place, as long as they could hire on board, train people, set expectations, and hold people accountable, great leadership potential, 100%. Now for you, Ben, I want to just go back to one of our other 6 commandments here for opening multiple locations is becoming oversubscribed. And you guys do a killer job at something that most owners have either shied away from, or other kind of marketing programs have told them like, it's dead, don't do it. But you guys get a lot of physician referrals. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to like physician referrals and stuff, we're not going too much in the weeds at all. Like, are these relationships that you've had or your dad has had over the years, and you're just trying to keep those, greased and updated and top of mind? Or like, is there something in particular that you have found that has really helped you guys keep those physicians top of mind and referring to Carlson Pro Care? Because you guys, I remember over the summer looking at your eval numbers, I'm like, whoa, it's like you guys were getting like 80 evals a week. How did you do that?
Yeah, so I think there's a few pieces to it. I think being in the communities for as long as we have is a big piece of it. And, having throughout the years good leaders who know how to nurture those relationships with the docs has been key for sure. And we've, been fortunate to have throughout the years, whether they're still with us or not, we've had really good leadership directors in place that have nurtured and maintained and known how to feather those relationships. But I think another piece to it, why some of those numbers may look a little crazy, is, yes, and this is something I actually was talking to my team about 2 weeks ago, is the tracking of the referral source. Because we have created results and been in our community for as long as we have, there's a large majority of people that are probably classified as a referral that have been with us before.
Oh, so and maybe a little past patient return.
And so yeah. we actually met on this 2 weeks ago, our front desk team, on saying we really need to do a better job with our questioning of when people are coming to us, because if they're coming with a script, it's almost always quick to just put them in as that referral. But if I had to guess, going off my gut, I would say probably 50% of those people are people that already know us, have family that have been with us, or have been with us before, or whatever.
Marketing,
so, yeah, so there's a lot of goodwill marketing. So that's part of that's just history and staying in touch with people in the community and just doing a great job while they're here. And people ask their family and friends where to go, and so there's a handful of pieces of it. I can't say there's anything.
You don't have to go too much. I didn't know if there was any secret sauce there, which was good. But no, we ran into the same issue where a physician would send a referral and they'd be, oh, okay, it's a physician referral. But then when you literally lean in, you're like, well, hey, just curious, did the physician say specifically to come to Haymarket PT, or did they? No, they just said go to physical therapy. And I went online and I saw your reviews.
Exactly.
Yeah. So there's almost like a primary, secondary. You don't want to get too granular with it, but I think your words earlier were when it comes to your product is like people equals product. So great people equals great product. So you guys have that. And the other thing was data. So you're a big data guy, and I think a lot of times owners, as they get bigger, they have to almost fall in love with data and reviewing it, because you could be an emotional owner and use your emotions to make decisions, which we all know could get us in trouble. You could be a logical owner where you just look at the data and make decisions and you remove the emotion from it. Or there's the scarcity urgency owners where, hey, there's a change coming next month because legislation's in place, so now we have to make a change. So there's a couple of different owners there. But no, I like that. So yeah, so Ben's doing a great job with not just the physician referrals, but all that goodwill marketing, past patient reactivations, the review stuff, the referrals. And Ben, how big is your list? If you had to say 40 years in business, what would you say? Now, I know you don't have all emails on it, but how big would you say your patient list is at the moment?
I think we did the last time we sent it over to you guys for a marketing initiative. I think it was over 3,000 or something, three to 4,000.
Yeah, you have like 3 or 4,000 folks, that you could have on a list, and for like emails and stuff. And it's just like 4% of those are always ready to convert back into patients. It's the 4% rule. So if you have like 1,000 people, you have 40 people. If you have 2,000, you have 80. If you have 10,000, you have almost 400 people. So the bigger your list goes, and as you build that asset over time, it really helps expedite this thing. Now, I know we got a couple more minutes before, because I know you're a busy guy. I need to get on your way. A couple of things that I want to know. So you're probably one of the most forward-thinking owners that we have, that I've seen, because you're always thinking like, should we do this? Should we do virtual kiosk? Should we do admin stuff? Should we, like, what about if we add prediction help? What if we add this thing? So for you, like over the next couple months or even the next couple of years, like what do you see as far as like multi-clinic owners? It's almost like non-negotiables. They're probably going to need to start looking into these tools or looking into these things to, in your words, modernize your clinics more to benefit the quality of care for patients. Like, what do you think we're moving towards in that forward-thinking innovation, Ben?
I think there's a couple things, or a few things I would say. I would say overall, and I think this goes for healthcare in general, and if you're in private practice, and this is where we started this conversation, is just overall being mindful of your aesthetic is, I think, something that's not spoken about enough, particularly in healthcare.
The aesthetics of the clinic, like
the aesthetic of the clinic,
okay, cool, great.
For some reason, healthcare just does not care about interior design. And, that's something that was really hit me in the face, because I came from, in art and film, and then doing some other things. I was in, design and aesthetics for film. Like, so it was, I came in like, why does everything look like shit? I was like, who picked these 18
who picked
shades
these colors,
of
these beiges and browns? Why
it's just like,
why is everything sterile looking?
Beige and brown till the end of the day. So I think that's a big one, because it's not just for your patients, but it's also for your team. So, rubberized flooring, more functional space, utilizing turf if you got space for it, having a break room of some sort so that people can like take a breather and eat and do their notes.
Yeah. So creating that high energy environment. So just
high energy environment, a lot of natural light. I think that's another thing. So much healthcare is like dark, dingy rooms with no natural light. So it's like, I don't care about your nice, reception area that you put all these nice veneers on, and then you go into the space and there's literally no natural light. Like, I don't care. Why is that there?
Yeah. Open it up.
So open concept, functional space, being mindful of aesthetics, trying to warm it up, bring earth tones in. It's a place for healing. You gotta make it feel like that.
Number one reason why people quit gyms is because of aesthetics and cleanliness.
Yeah. So I think that's a big one that I think everybody can, start taking action on.
Okay.
I think that people like, your EMR is, you've got to be assessing it regularly. I think that's something that we've gotten into the habit of. A lot of people just like sit with their EMR and they run with it for years, but tech is changing so quickly. You've got to either be partnered with somebody like we use Prompt, to shout out to them. I think that they're the best in the space and the most innovative and moving the fastest and set up for being able to, I think, of all the people that I've investigated, they're the most set up to continue to adapt to the change that's going to be coming with AI. And I think they do a really good job on that. So you've got to have an EMR as your base that is going to keep up with the rate of change and keep you competitive.
I like the word invest that you use there too, because sometimes people
you cannot be looking dollars to dollars.
Yeah, they hear pricing on those EMRs and they want to be
well, this is this is this. It's like, it's not apples to apples. You've got to, it's an investment in your business, and you're like, it's like, you got to think about, think about like a car. If you're spending this amount on a 1970 Chevy that you're driving around versus you're driving a brand new Audi, that's the type of thing that you need to be comparing those dollars to. How fast is it going to allow you to go? What's it going to do for your team?
The reporting, the data,
reporting, how clean is your data? Who are they partnering with to make sure that you're getting the best innovation? Another shout out, you mentioned them as well. That partnered with a handful of EMRs, is Prediction Health.
Yeah, Prediction Health is great.
anybody who's not doing that is crazy at this point in time. I know the price for some people may be a sticker shock, but it's just the data, and now with their Sidekick and scribing abilities, what it's doing for documentation plus compliance. I mean, it's just a no-brainer. So that's something I think everybody's got to have.
I'm slowly getting to the point where I'm losing compassion and sympathy for anybody who says that they struggle to get their notes done, because I'm like, with all the
There's so much tools. There's so many tools
these days. It's like I
have no
understand
excuse.
it's a low energy activity for most PTs, but at the same time, with, like you said, things like Sidekick, and there's even like Hippo Scribe out there. There's these different companies.
There's so many tools. There's so many
tools.
No excuse.
So,
no excuse.
But again, another investment opportunity.
It's an investment.
Cost of not getting it is greater than the cost of getting it. Sometimes that's how I feel.
Absolutely. Well, we had that same PTA that we were just talking about, that we made a clinical director, been with us 20 years. And he, after we rolled out Sidekick for Prediction Health over the summer, 2 weeks afterwards, pulled Kevin and I aside and was like, this is the first weekend in the last 10 years I'm not taking any notes home.
Let's go. In Prediction Health, notice they said the number one churn rate when they went back and looked was what percentage of their people were doing notes outside of business hours. So wild to see. And shout out to Karina, one of our owners that we work with. What she does is she goes back to the team and she says, like, hey, if I'm going to purchase, or if I'm going to invest in this EMR or Prediction Health, or if I get like Sarah Health for RTM, I'm okay with investing it, but you guys have to be willing to use it. So I'm not going to just buy something to buy something. So she gets a lot of buy-in from her team by asking for permission to get the thing and then go from there. But what else you got, Ben, before we
I would say, if we're speaking directly to owners, you have got to be spending time on a weekly basis as a private practice owner understanding AI. And I know it's like, it's something that is still, people feel like, oh, there's too many question marks. I don't know. Here, a perfect example. I literally did this morning. I had a notice from the Department of Revenue Services because of a filing issue with our payroll. We changed payroll platform. There was some type of automation issue. Things didn't get filed correctly. They're going to give us a penalty, and I wanted to submit a waiver to waive the penalty because for different reasons. But I didn't fully understand the ruling of it. I didn't understand the document, and then some of the questions I wasn't quite sure the right way of wording the questions. So I went to ChatGPT and I spent my time with it for 10 minutes, literally being like, this is the document. Are you familiar with it? Can you explain this to me like I'm a fifth grader? And then I said, here are the questions that they want. Here's my layman's terms on why we have this issue. Can you format it so that it fits these questions to submit back to them in, the proper way? And is there anything else? This is something I would have normally like spoken to a tax accountant to. I would have spoken to maybe a legal to, I would have brought in all these consultants. I literally formatted it. It took me 10 minutes. I then sent it off. Before I sent it to the Department of Revenue Service, I sent it to my accountant. Was like, hey, here are the questions they want me to answer. Here are my answers. Is there anything missing? Do I need to update? And he's like, did you write this? Like, he was like, where did these answers come from? I said, don't worry
about it. I got an assistant.
He's like, this is perfect. I'm like, okay, great. So it's a small example, but we have to continue to be lean and mean. We have to figure out how to stay thriving as private practices. And it's a tool that if you don't spend the time to learn, you're going to be left behind. It's just, it's
policies, procedures, SOPs could all be written with that. Even patient information, pamphlets, booklet. I mean, they have it now where it creates photos for you. You could create PowerPoint slides. It's wild what it's coming out with. And I think if you're using Joey and I kind of go back and forth on this too, because we sometimes see people posting on their, and you could tell it's kind of probably some AI written things, but you could use it as like an accelerator, but then you still have to go behind it and put
you got to do the 20%.
Let it get
the way you got to think about AI is like the time it takes you to get from 0 to 80 is accelerated 100x, and all your time now is spent from 80 to 100. Putt. That's it, 6-inch putt.
Just a 6-inch putt. We're just trying to tap it.
Let AI do the rest of the course and just put it in. So I think that's a piece. I won't go into too much as far as like innovations in the clinic, obviously not being a trained PT.
Yeah,
I
how
have
about
some stuff.
hiring? Because 6 locations in the future here, hiring is a big thing. Like, what are you guys seeing when it comes to hiring and trying to make sure you got enough recruits coming in? Because as you grow, it's either real estate recruiting or retention. Like, what are you guys seeing as far as like the
Well,
shifting here? Yeah,
it's like, always be closing, right?
always be hiring.
Always be hiring. That's kind
Always
of a
be hiring.
motto Kevin and I have now really adopted over the last year, that we're just not taking our foot off the gas. We're just continuing. And we even told the team for this, somebody we hired yesterday, knowing that he's going to be somebody that's going to be moving into one of the new clinics that we open in 2025. In the short term, we may be a little overstaffed, but we felt that he was the right person to bring in and that he's going to be part of that puzzle to open that new clinic.
Awesome.
So I think just don't stay stagnant, always be hiring. There's a lot of things you could do, but really it just comes down to staying in the game, because you never know when someone's going to come across. And then I think the other thing that we are really trying to be diligent on is, like, if somebody says no, it's not necessarily a never.
Yeah,
Like,
it's not right now.
it's a not right now. And so
Yeah.
that's another motto that Kevin and I have really adopted. Between you guys, we have another coach consultant that we work with that really encourage us with that. And shout out to Mike Newla if you watch this.
Mike.
What's that?
I said, "What's up, Mike?"
Yeah. But yeah, so just encouraging us to, and everybody, just, you never know. And we've had people that we were, for instance, like really recruiting last year heavily, but all of the renovations and remodels were all still an idea. So we were pitching everybody, being like, we're going to do all these great things, these renovations, we're going to do all these, and they're like, well, I've seen you guys for the last 5 years. I was with you 2 years ago, and it's still the same 2 years later. So, and now they're seeing that these things are happening, and they're like all of a sudden re-engaging, be like, whoa, you guys actually did this. Oh, this is actually happening. So
Yeah.
it's like, just because somebody says no, if you feel like they're a really good fit for your company, like, stay engaged. Between Kevin and I, we probably have 15, 20 PTs that all have said no to us in some way, shape, or form, but we feel like are good fits for our team, that we are still on a monthly basis staying engaged with to some capacity.
Still nurturing them. Wow, that's great.
Still nurturing them. Yeah,
Yeah.
because you never know. You never know when it's going to be the right fit for them, where it's going to be the right fit for you. And it's like showing people that you care about them as an individual and their family and their interests and things like that, outside of like, well, you said no, see you later, now that's it. It's just such a missed opportunity, I think, for people. Just keep on that track and keep engaged and keep nurturing if you feel
I
like
think
they're
they say 9 points of contact now, 9 to 11 points of contact before
Yeah.
people even start to build a like, know, and trust with you. And same goes for your just patient leads. I mean, some people do Facebook or whatever, they get a lead and they say no, but you call those leads 6 to 8 weeks later and they're still in pain. They're going to be like, well, first of all, no one's ever called me like
Right.
you just did. So
Right.
so there's a checkbox, and yeah, I'm still in pain. Let's get this thing figured out. So there you go, staying top of mind with some of these guys. And I think that's great. So yeah, and Ben, it's been a pleasure getting to know you more and seeing this. My personal opinion, I think your dad would be, or is, super proud of, everything that you're doing and taking over. Cause I know that, I'm a dad now with 2 kids, and, I think first that probably great to give your children some freedom and store. I'm sure he's a pretty mindful about as owners, we work on recognition and praise and stuff like that.
Thanks, man. Thanks. Appreciate that. Can you hear me? I think we froze
I
a
think
little bit.
one of us froze.
Yeah. Somebody froze.
I'll have my editor go in and edit it, but I was just mentioning at the end here, Ben, before we log off, I was just saying that, if he hasn't told you, I'll just tell you, I think your dad will be probably pretty proud of, you taking over the family business. And, I got 2 little girls myself, and, to be able to have one of those guys come in and take over, it's something probably every parent dreams about, but at the same time, some kids don't want it. So for you to step in and, figure out where some of the disruption was, and then kind of retool this thing, and now you're going to grow it into something, he never thought was, possible. And like you said, modernize your business and being able to be in the game for a long period of time. I think that's huge, man. I think that's huge. And just kudos to you. And I'm excited to see where
I appreciate that. I can't take full credit for it, for a standpoint of he laid a really good foundation. And like, shout out to also like Kevin, my partner, the 2 of them and some of the other people that are no longer with us, they set the foundation and built a really good team. And we've got a great retention rate. So, the only reason I'm able to do what I'm doing is because we've got such a great team, foundation underneath us that take care of the day to day so that I can be focused on strategy. So, we have a really, really great team, and, I certainly can't take full credit for that, but, the people that have come before me certainly laid the path for us to continue to build and success, and it just needed a fresh set of eyes and someone that could shake some things up, and it's been good.
Awesome, man.
I
Yeah,
think
they say, the wider the foundation, the higher the peak. So it's
yeah,
so there you go. So
yeah.
I love it.
I would say to wrap on one thing that I've been talking with the team a lot about, just to end on the innovation piece,
Mhm.
is right now the pace of demand for PT is so far beyond the supply that we've got to be thinking how to get people better faster, and so that's something I'm really challenging our team with, and not saying to rush treatment, but saying
Sure.
as
Yeah.
we're thinking, like, traditionally we've run things off of the metrics of a plan of care being an average of 12 to 14 visits. You're like, but if you're running with that being your mindset, it does limit you a little bit. You're like, well, can we get this? Is there a way to get this person better in 10 or 8 or 6 or whatever it may
100%.
be?
Yeah, because
What
now you're
pieces?
increasing the perceived value significantly. Time
And
delay.
so,
Yeah.
so that's something I'm really encouraging our team and challenging our team to be thinking regularly, saying, what do we need to bring in? Where's the research say? What technology is out there? But how do we get people better faster? Because we're not going to be able to solve, in my opinion, for whatever it's worth, we're not going to be able to solve the supply and demand issue in PT by just more PTs. That's just, it's the gap is too wide at this point,
Yeah.
unless there's some drastic changes with the way that the educational system
Not
works.
with 70 kids a class coming out of every
Yeah.
year, and only 300 universities now,
Yeah.
which is great. It used to be like 150-ish. Now there's almost 316 accredited universities. So it's getting bigger. But like you said, it's just, and that's a podcast in itself of, anybody who says they have marketing and sales issues, unless you're a startup, within 1 to 5 years. If you're over 5 years in business and you're not full, you have to start looking at the product a little bit, because there is such a supply demand issue right now that it's just like, if there's a shortage of PTs, we really shouldn't have an issue with getting patients. And if you are, we have to look at that. And I'm okay with saying that, because we see it all the time, and people equals products. I mean, we just don't have the right people in place. But that's a huge nugget there, because if you want to increase the value, you have to decrease the time delay in getting people better quicker with little or to no energy and sacrifice either, because people don't want to be there for hours and they don't want to be doing sheets and sheets of home exercise program. But it sounds like to me, before we wrap up, Ben, it sounds like you got to implement an R&D division in your company. So a little research and development, and get yourself a nice R&D tax credit.
2025.
So there you go.
Put
All
it on
your
the list.
CEUs, all your functional outcomes, put someone in charge of that. Whoever's getting all your outcomes, you could all put in that.
We've got some groundwork. We've got some groundwork in that
There you
we're
go.
working
Ask
on.
ChatGPT how to create an R&D division.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there you go, man.
I'll have the answer for you tonight.
You'll have it. I have it in 10 minutes, and you'll have the legal documents, the blueprints, and all the contracts, man. It'll be wild.
I'll send it to you in the morning.
Ben, I appreciate your time, man. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I know that money loves speed in collapsing time frames. So I know this time next year, you'll already be on your path to 6 locations and beyond. So shout out to you, Kevin, the rest of your team. You guys are crushing it. And I'm looking forward to hearing more of your story going forward. So appreciate it, man.
Hey, shout out to you guys too. Everything you guys do, we really appreciate, you guys and the value you guys add. I think that's one thing that I just real, compliment you back on. I think that you guys just add a tremendous amount of value for, what the way that you guys run your business and everything that you do. You guys just, the value for dollar is just like so absurd, in my opinion, for what you guys do on a day-to-day basis as a team. So, thanks for all the work that you guys put in, and how you're contributing to private practice. I really appreciate you.
Awesome, man. Well, I appreciate the kind words, man. But we'll keep innovating, just like you'll keep innovating, and hopefully we see each other at the top, my friend. So,
all right, brother.
Ben, it's been an absolute pleasure. Go crush it. See you on the next one.
See you, man.